All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're tackling something pretty amazing, something that's always changing around us, like right under our noses. Dynamic English.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how, vocab, slang, all those idioms really keep English uh, so vibrant, so alive.
Exactly. And today, we'll be looking at four specific examples. We'll be diving deep into liven up, be all ears, love that one, and cajole. Oh, and we can't forget the British slang. You got to have some British slang in the mix. Gobby.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what's really interesting is how, at first glance, these words might seem simple, everyday words, but
Yeah,
there's a lot more to them than meets the eye. We're gonna kind of peel back the layers and see what's going on underneath.
I like that. Peel back the layers. Okay, so let's start with liven up. It's something you hear, well, pretty much everywhere, right? From casual conversations to actually, even in more formal settings, you would think it's but.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? And it kind of gets you thinking, like, why do we have this need to liven things up? What is it about our culture that makes us want to add this extra energy, this vibrancy?
That's a really good question. Is it because we kind of put such a high value on energy and enthusiasm,
Yeah.
almost like it's like a measure of success?
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. Liven up suggests that being lively, being energetic, it's inherently better, more desirable. It's almost like it reflects a cultural bias, right?
Huh.
A preference for dynamism, for action, for things that are, moving and shaking.
I see. Yeah, yeah, I see. And even that little up at the end, it's fascinating. Does that imply like a sense of improvement that we're taking something and we're making it, I don't know, inherently better by making it more lively?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a sense of positive change there, right? Like taking something from a less desirable state to something more engaging, more palatable. It's like, it's like adding spice to a bland dish.
I love that analogy. Yeah, it's like you're spicing things up, making them more appealing, more yeah, more vibrant.
Exactly. And speaking of spicing things up, there's a great example of Liven Up in one of the articles we looked at. It talks about this company that they decided to use interactive games, to liven up their training sessions, which, let's face it, training sessions could be pretty dry.
Oh yeah. It's funny because when you think of liven up, you usually think of like a party or something like that.
Yeah.
But it really applies to any situation that needs a boost, right? Like a boring meeting, a classroom that's lost its spark, even personal relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And if we go back and look at the roots of the word, the etymology, it actually comes directly from live, meaning full of life. So, that connection to vitality, to being full of life, it's really at the core of what it means to liven up.
So it's not just about being loud or energetic. It's more about bringing a sense of a sense of aliveness to something, like breathing life into it.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to some interesting synonyms, right? You have energize, animate, invigorate, enliven.
And each one has a slightly different shade of meaning. It's not just a simple one-to-one swap.
Right. So for instance, like energize, that has more of a focus on physical energy, while animate is more about bringing something to life, almost like giving it a soul.
Oh, I see. And then what about invigorate? That one feels more about revitalization, like you're breathing new life into something.
You got it. It's like giving it a shot of energy, bringing it back to life. And it's so interesting how we can choose the right word depending on the context, right? On the specific effect we want to create.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on to our next word, be all ears. Now, this one always makes me think of, like someone leaning in, truly focused, truly engaged in what's being said.
It's such a classic example of an idiom, where the meaning of the whole phrase is so much greater than the sum of its parts. Like you can't really figure it out just by looking at the individual words, be all
Yeah,
ears.
you have to kind of decipher the hidden meaning. But what's so cool about it is how it really speaks to the importance of listening, right? Like truly listening, being present.
Absolutely. It highlights listening as an active, engaged process, not just passively hearing sounds, but really absorbing, processing and understanding what's being said.
Yeah, like being fully present, fully in the moment.
Yeah. And in a world that's just overflowing with information and
Yeah.
distractions, right? being able to truly listen is such a valuable skill. It's essential for so many things.
Like building strong relationships, for example,
Ah.
or resolving conflicts, or even just understanding different perspectives.
Right. And one of the articles actually talks about how be all ears was really crucial, like really crucial for diplomats during negotiations. They had to be so attuned to every word, every nuance, every gesture to really grasp the underlying intentions.
Wow. It's not just a casual phrase, right? It has real world implications in some pretty high stakes situations.
Absolutely. And I love the imagery that some people use to describe this phrase. Like imagine someone's ears like physically growing larger,
Yeah.
to emphasize that complete absorption of information.
That's such a great visual. Yeah, I can totally picture that.
And of course, there are other ways to express this concept too, right? Like you could say attentive or alert or, listening intently, ready to hear. But each of those phrases kind of highlights a slightly different aspect of being a good listener.
Right, right. It's so much more expressive than just saying I'm listening, which can sound, I don't know, a bit passive, a bit flat.
Be all ears. It shows that genuine interest, that willingness to really engage with what the other person is saying.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about a word that's all about persuasion. Cajole. And
Yeah.
this one feels a lot more, I don't know, nuanced, more delicate than just saying persuade, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Cajole has this subtle finesse to it.
Yeah, it's like you're leading someone towards a decision, but they don't necessarily realize they're being led.
Right. It's like a gentle nudge in the right direction.
A gentle nudge. I like that.
And one of the sources we looked at actually delved into the etymology of cajole, and it turns out it comes from the French cajole.
Oh, interesting. French origin.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because it really emphasizes the role of flattery, right? And that sustained coaxing. Like, you're not just presenting a logical argument, you're kind of appealing to their emotions. You're using, a bit of charm to win them over.
Yeah, so it's not just about logic or reason. It's about appealing to someone's emotions and using your charm to kind of bring them around to your way of thinking.
Right. And this raises some interesting questions about the ethics of persuasion, right? Like,
Right.
when does cajoling cross the line into manipulation?
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. Like where do you draw the line?
It all comes down to intent, I think, and the methods used. Is it about building genuine connection? Is it about finding common ground? Or is it about, using trickery to get what you want?
It's a fine line for sure.
It is. And that's where understanding the nuances of language becomes so important.
Absolutely. So let's dive into some of those nuances by looking at some synonyms for cajole. What do we have?
All right, so we've got coax, for example, which implies like gentle encouragement. And then you have wheedle, which has a slightly more negative connotation, maybe hinting at slyness or even deception.
Okay, so coax is more positive, more gentle. Wheedle is a little bit more sneaky, a little bit more
Exactly. And then of course you have sweet talk, which is all about using charm and flattery to get your way.
no, sweet talk. Yeah, that one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. But each of these words kind of highlights a different approach to cajoling, right?
Yeah.
And it's up to the listener to really kind of discern the intent behind the chosen word.
I see. All right, well, are you ready to cross the pond?
I am. Let's do it.
All right, because we're venturing into British slang territory with gobby. And I have to say, I always loved this word. It's so expressive. It paints such a vivid picture.
Oh, it does. It immediately conjures up like a very specific personality type, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Someone who's outspoken, maybe a little bit loud, not afraid to voice their opinion.
Yeah, and what's interesting about gobby is that it can be used both positively and negatively.
Oh, absolutely. It can be endearing, it can be exasperating. It really depends.
So we could describe someone who's lively and engaging, full of witty banter.
Right.
Or it could describe someone who's just annoyingly loud and opinionated.
Right. It all depends on the context, right? And the speaker's attitude towards the gobby person.
Exactly. And one of the sources pointed out the connection between gobby and gob, which of course is British slang for mouth.
Whoa, yeah, of course.
So it's literally about someone who uses their mouth a lot.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us to some pretty colorful synonyms, right?
Hmm.
Like noisy or outspoken or talkative or even, loudmouth. And each of those words kind of carries its own level of intensity.
It's amazing how much range there is in just this one little word. Gobby can be endearing, it can be annoying, it can be funny.
Yeah, it all depends on whether you find that outspokenness, refreshing or totally overwhelming.
Exactly.
So imagine you're in a crowded pub, right? And there's this one voice that